here is the stuff they live happily fairy tales are made.
The Spencers have, through the centuries, fought for their king and country.
And your great kindness in having us here this evening.
She's responded to adulation with modesty and spirit. The monarchy will be the benefactor. And the wearer, of course, the clothes. Fashion with a completely individual flair.
The Prince of Wales had just been on TV to admit adultery with Camilla Parker Bowles.
Did you try to be faithful and honourable to your wife when you took on the vow of marriage?
Yes, absolutely.
And you were?
Yes. Until it became irretrievably broken down. Us both having tried.
The princess that evening was due to go out to the Serpentine Gallery to see her old friend Lord Palumbo and open his new exhibition. I can't go. I'm not going. I'm not going. It'll be too humiliating. The whole world now knows that Charles has been having an affair. He's admitted it. You are going, I said. I've got nothing to wear. Yes, you have got something to wear. I went up to her wardrobe room and picked out a Christina Strombolian dress with a fishtail. This is what you're going to wear, I said. I can't fit into it. Yes, you can. Put it on. So she slipped it on. Now, to complement that, I think we should have the pearl choker and the sapphire. That's all you need. High heels and those jewels. Right, she put them on and she looked $1 million. Remember, when you go out there, I said, you stride, you hold your head high, you smile, you engage, firm handshake. Say to yourself, I am Diana, Princess of Wales, and I am here to stay.
So after Princess Diana and Prince Charles separated in the early 90s, the princess's confidence grew, and that directly translated into her fashion choices. So she kind of threw the rule book out the window, and that resulted in a more minimal aesthetic, but she didn't deprive herself of wearing anything, you know, that would have been deemed more sexy or too sexy before. Sleek fitted designs, muted tones, a bit of a pastel colour palette, beiges, blacks, whites, and very sleek and tailored designs, more fitted.
In the early days, Diana's light was small, but he began to shine brighter and brighter and brighter. And it was a sort of a Star is Born situation. Prince Charles would say to her, well, I married you, I made you a princess. You weren't born royal. I'm the royal. So it would peeve him when on royal visits, people would be shouting on one side of the street, we want Diana, we want Diana.
And I've come to the conclusion that really it would have been far easier to have had 2 wives. To have covered both sides of the street. And I could have walked down the middle, directing the operation.
This is a man who's been born to be king. This is a man who has been treated from the very beginning as a god. Suddenly being eclipsed by this woman, he wasn't very happy.
To be engaged to such a lovely lady, and my goodness, I was lucky enough to marry her. And we had many, many messages. It's amazing what ladies do when your back's turned.
Well, I think after they got married and they went on their honeymoon, even then things were starting to unravel a bit, because I don't think it matched what Diana had expected. She had this vision of being like a fairy princess, and being carried away into the sunset. But the minute she was married, her husband was off working. On the honeymoon, she was so in love, but he spent a lot of time reading books. You know, she was on this enormous yacht, Britannia, surrounded by like 200 crew, and yet she was on her own and she didn't know how to deal with it. She was too young and too naive, and Charles was on the upper deck reading and sunbathing, and she was lonely. I don't think it really sank in. She was very naive, and I think she thought, oh, one day I'll be queen, fine. But I think it was really more the pressure of being on such public display that got to her, and I think that's the pressure that gets to every girl that marries into the royal family. But no one had ever experienced this before. Diana was the first one. And I remember the Queen sort of saying, it's just because she's young and new and it'll all calm down. Because it never calmed down, it just got worse. So she was under a lot of pressure.
You know, there wasn't a newspaper that didn't at some time print something about Diana. Most of it, interesting enough, was positive, but there was the negative aspect of the Diana story that A, she didn't like, and I dare say a lot of people didn't like either.
One of Diana's most famous pieces was her black sheep jumper, and we first see her wearing it when she goes to the polo. She's engaged to Prince Charles, and in the picture she's quite shy, she's not performing for the cameras, and she has this little tiny collar poking out the top of the black sheep jumper, and she's wearing jeans, she's very casual. And interestingly, this rowing blazers design, she then rewears 2 years later.
And you can very much tell that there has been a shift between the two pictures. In the second image, she's standing straighter, she's kind of looking at the camera, and the jumper obviously has a black sheep on it. So I think the first time she wore it, it was obviously just she found it was a cute jumper, so wasn't thinking anything about it. The second time, the jumper is slightly different, so we don't actually know what happened between the two, if she lost weight or just lost it. And the sheep is actually facing a different direction to the white sheep. And she was also wearing a white shirt underneath with a black bow that sort of points to the black sheep. And a lot of people were saying that it was a statement at the time because there were already a few arguments with Prince Charles. She was considered a bit of a rebel. She didn't want to follow all the rules in the family. So it sort of symbolised her being the black sheep of the royal family.
The 80s was a significant period of transformation for Diana. In this decade, she becomes a wife, a mother, a princess, and also an international icon. At the start, we start to see her in a preppy sort of aesthetic. She's got high-crust collars, she's wearing cardigans, sweater vests, pleated skirts, and she'd carry a little woven basket with her when she was spotted around London. On the royal tour, by 1983, she's starting to experiment a little bit and play with her style, her colours that she's wearing, and different shapes that she'll start to experiment with.
As the 80s went on, she became increasingly confident. So towards the late 80s, for example, she wore lots of sequined gowns, which would perhaps have been thought to be more for Hollywood actresses, but she would wear them and wear them really well. And she actually earned the nickname Dynasty Di thanks to them.
By the end of the decade, she's really hit her stride, and she is wearing almost all of the 80s trends, and she's playing quite a significant role in setting them as well. She'll wear tailored angular pieces, she'll wear block colours, dropped waist, padded shoulders.
One of the most famous dresses of that era was the John Travolta dress, which was designed by Victor Edelstein, and it was off-the-shoulder, long-skirted, midnight blue dress, which she wore to dance with John Travolta at the White House.
I did notice that one day, going through the drawing room, the old Queen Mother, she passed the magazine table and Diana's face was on the front of Hello Magazine. And as she walked past the table, she flipped the magazine over onto its backside and carried on walking. That to me said, she's not really accepted. They don't like it. She's beginning to outshine even the senior members of the royal family. This is dangerous territory.
Diana as a person was about as normal as you're going to get. But I liked her style, her mannerisms, and it's interesting that I was asked recently to sort of pass comment on, you know, the actors that played Diana in the variety of films from, you know, Naomi Watts through to The Crown and the new film. And it's interesting, it's impossible almost to be Diana physically, but you can get as close to being Diana by what she doesn't say more than what she does say, by the mannerisms, the look on her face, her reaction, her interaction with people. She would listen. And the number of occasions that we would ever go on a public engagement, for most royals, it's shaking hands with people behind a metal barrier. It's sort of a hand comes across and, hello, you know, you get pushed back. With Diana, it was different. And I remember one incident in Manchester. We were walking down some street in Manchester that had been terraced off with these metal railings. And we were walking down and she's chatting away, and suddenly she sees this elderly woman with a walking stick about 3 people back. And she said, "What are you doing over there?" And this sort of woman, you know, with this sort of manicure neck, said, "Oh, she said, I want to say hello to you." She said, "Oh, just to make that, got this." She said, "Get that policeman, Ken, and get that lady to come through here." So the lady, you know, came through, you know, started chatting away there, and she said, "Look, you ought to get a warmer coat than that." So sort of suddenly, out of nowhere, you're getting this sort of princess that's now more concerned about somebody else in the crowd than herself. This was typical Diana.
So my favourite look of Diana's in the 80s, although I'm tempted to say the John Travolta dress, it was actually a more understated style by one of her favourite designers, Catherine Walker, and she wore it for a dinner in Melbourne in 1988. And it was a light pink kind of ruched dress. It was strapless, sort of a column dress, very chic, with pale blue flowers imprinted on it. And at the back, it featured quite a big, spectacular bow that really elevated the dress. Princess Diana and Catherine Walker's relationship really blossomed in the late 80s, which is when Princess Diana really found her true sort of permanent style and the one that a lot of people know and love. Her designs were well known for being sleek, very tailored, and a very sort of minimal aesthetic. And actually, Princess Diana was buried in one of Catherine Walker's black coat looks in 1997.
My favourite Diana look from the 80s has to be when she goes to the polo, and the specific outfit she's wearing has got this 2-piece set. It's a puffy blouse with a big print on the front of it. It's monochrome, and she wears a black leather belt with white trousers, and her hair is kind of blown out in this Farrah Fawcett type vibe. And I think this signals the start of another era for Diana. She's starting to find her confidence and starting to use fashion as a way to express herself. And the fact that she also looks quite comfortable and confident, I think, is reflected in the outfit and back into how she must have been feeling back then.
But even still, the princess tried to make her marriage work, and she never actually wanted a divorce. She said, "I'll have a separation, but I don't want to be divorced. For the children's sake, I want us to remain a family unit, to bring them up as parents." But the Queen wouldn't hear of it. The Queen wrote to Princess Diana and said, "For the sake of the monarchy and the country and the church, we think it's best if you and Charles divorce." The princess was furious. She says, "This is my marriage, not theirs. It's nothing to do with the church. It's to do with me and Charles and the children." In the very end, she had to succumb to a divorce.
Your patron has never been happier to see you. Whatever uncertainties the last few weeks may have brought, I want you to be certain of this: our work together will continue unchanged, especially now as Christmas brings its own painful stresses to so many people in need. The sick, the old, the handicapped, and the homeless, the lonely, the confused, and the simply unloved, who are needing your help more than ever.
I was with her for 10 years in total and began traveling with her around the world, to Angola, to Bosnia, to far-reach countries, searching out people who were less fortunate than we were, people who needed their plight heightened by an incredible icon of our times.
I think you ought to retire gracefully.
Good morning, ma'am. Were you surprised at the political furore that developed as a result of your visit to Angola?
I saw it merely as a distraction because I'm not a political figure. I am a humanitarian figure, and always have been and always will be.
We will concentrate, of course, on dissemination.
It's been a very intensive 4 days. I have seen a great deal. I've seen the people affected by landmines. I've seen the landmines themselves. Angola is an example of what the Red Cross can achieve around the world, given the sort of cooperation that we have seen that exists between the Red Cross and the NGOs and the Angolan authorities.
Excuse me, Ray, can you hang on, pal?
Despite the controversy at home, the princess's campaigning continued today in what's believed to be the most heavily mined town in the world. Already briefed about the political row she'd stepped into, she seemed taken aback by the description of her as a loose cannon.
Well, Jenny, I'm only trying to highlight a problem that's going on all around the world. That's all.
It's been said, though, that you're aligning yourself with Labour policy. Do you think that's wise?
Labour? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what
We have really to keep the programme
going.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I remember going to a hospital in Bosnia where a little girl had been blown up by a landmine. She'd been into the field to retrieve her brother's football, and she'd been blown up and lost her legs. She was critically ill, and the princess sat by her bed and held her hand, and this little girl couldn't understand English. And the princess left. The little girl opened her eyes and said to the nurse in her language, "I've just seen an angel." That one moment of humanity changed my life. And I saw the princess in a different light. I saw her as beautiful inside as she was on the outside.
I wanted just to be with you, to show you that you are not forgotten.
Life with Diana was 24/7. My wife said, there are 3 people in my marriage too, because Diana is always there. She used to say, she's your baby. I said, yes, she's my baby. She needs me. She needs me to be there. My wife had 2 children. The princess had no one. Her children were away at boarding school. She had no husband. Occasionally, she had a male companion, but they came and they went. I was responsible for that too. I was a go-between. I was the one that went out with my car, brought people back to Kensington Palace in the back seat of my car underneath a blanket, just to give the princess some love. All she was ever looking for was to be loved. She used to say to me, all I ever want, Paul, is a man to put their arms around me and say, I love you. That's not too much to ask, is it? And that's what she was searching for. Towards the end of her life, of course, she found her soulmate. Her soulmate was Hasnat Khan, the heart surgeon.
I remember the day the princess met Hasnat Khan. She came back from the hospital, having visited children on the ward, and she said the most astonishing things happened to me today. As we sat down, she told me about this meeting. She said, I was going up in the elevator and somebody put their foot into the elevator door as it was closing, and it opened again. And there he was. This gorgeous man was staring at me. Well, who wouldn't stare at Princess Diana? Surrounded by a gaggle of students, Hasn't was on his rounds around the hospital. And there he was, face to face with the princess for the first time. And she said, I knew I would have a relationship with him. Our chemistry was so strong that I knew. Of course, their relationship was nearly 2 years in the making. 2 years, no one knew about him. Again, I was the go-between. I would bring him into the palace. I'd ask chef to cook dinner for 2. I'd wait dinner for 2. I'd make sure they were comfortable before I went home. And in the morning, I'd take him back in the boot of my car to the hospital. So the police never saw him. The chefs never saw him. The maids never saw him. And no one saw him, just me.
The only secret Diana ever kept from me was the Martin Bashir interview for Panorama. I was sent home on a Sunday afternoon. Strange, I thought. Why would she be sending me home? Go and spend some time with your family. I'm doing nothing this afternoon. Don't worry about me. The next morning I came to work. I noticed all the furniture had been moved. Why have you moved the furniture? It's not in the same place. I had a dance class. I had to move the furniture out of the way just so that we could exercise. Strange, very strange. She avoided me for the next 2 days, never spoke to me. And then she told me that she'd made a recording with Martin Bashir for Panorama. What have you said? Well, I just put the record straight, she said.
I think every strong woman in history has had to walk down a similar path, and I think it's the strength that causes the confusion and the fear. Why is she strong? Where does she get it from? Where is she taking it? Where is she going to use it?
Something like 31 million people stopped in their tracks on that Monday night and couldn't believe what they were seeing. The Princess of Wales bearing her heart on national television. We couldn't take our eyes away from it. We couldn't believe what we were hearing.
Do you think Mrs. Parker Bowles was a factor in the breakdown of your marriage?
Well, there were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded.
She was honest, open, and frank. Did you love James Hewitt? Yes, I adored him. He was too raw for most people and an embarrassment for the royal family. That was the final straw. That was the straw that broke the back of the House of Windsor. From that moment on, Diana was outcast. Her titles were stripped. She was no longer prayed for in church. She was on her own.
So in the 80s, Diana's style is quite experimental, and she's playing around with the latest trends, and she's starting to really hit her stride in terms of her fashion, her aesthetic. By the 90s, her style matures once again, and she's starting to dress more for her. And it's believed that this is perhaps her freest decade in terms of what she wears and why she wears what she wears. So instead of donning bright, glittery sequin dresses, she'll lean in more towards a less overt look. She'll go more minimalist. She'll wear simple shift dresses, or she'll wear tailored suits.
As her style became simpler, it was actually more accessible. So whereas before she was the unattainable princess, now she was more of a chic civilian, as it were. Her looks were copied, and they influenced a lot of celebrities, from Madonna to Cindy Crawford to Elizabeth Taylor. Princess Diana revealed her very famous 90s sleek haircut on the Vogue cover in 1990, and that was arguably her most iconic look and spurned so many copies. You know, she was the original The Rachel. A lot of people went to hairdressers asking to copy that look, and it was beautiful and sleek and really went with her wardrobe of the 90s. When she was a princess, she wore a lot of UK brands and very traditional ones, but when she left the royal family and became even more of an international icon because she embraced lots of other big brands such as Versace and Dior, and of course we all know that they named a Dior bag after her, so the Lady D bag.
There was a memo came from Buckingham Palace. Diana, when you're in public, please wear a hat and please wear gloves, because you're touching the public and you might catch something.
Historically speaking, the royal family, when they met with crowds, they often wore gloves as a way of not catching germs and not becoming ill. But Princess Diana made headlines because she chose not only not to wear gloves to meet patients with AIDS, but she also hugged them and held their hands. And at the time, there was still the belief that if that is how you could catch AIDS, if you touched AIDS patients.
HIV does not make people dangerous to know. So you can shake their hands and give them a hug. Heaven knows they need it. What's more, you can share their homes, their workplaces, their playgrounds, and their toys. We all need to be alert to the special needs of those for whom AIDS is the last straw in an already heavy burden of discrimination and misfortune.
We lived in a world of ignorance. We lived in a world where people were not educated. They didn't know. The princess introduced me to the first person dying with HIV and AIDS. She would sit and hold people's hands and counsel them.
Diana really put an emphasis on coming into contact with the public and relating to them and creating a bond, and removing the gloves is symbolic of that. And there's a picture of her in 1991 where she's shaking hands with an AIDS patient, which was significant insofar as it helped dispel a lot of the misconceptions around AIDS at the time. And it was something that was a marked departure from what we'd seen previously in the royal family.
You visited a lot of sick children in hospital, and for those visits, because it was already a glum environment, she chose to wear really bright floral neon dresses with jangling jewels so that they would sort of see her as a bit of a clown and they could play with her, and it was, you know, all about touching the textures of the dress, and she made them feel like they were really at home with her.
In most circumstances, when the man on the street, if you like, meets royalty, it's in a situation that's planned, it's corralled, and you stand there and you'll be there, and somebody will come along and you'll shake your hand, don't say anything, you either bob or you curtsy, and then you move on, and that's your lasting impact of royalty. And that wasn't Diana. You know, Diana would come along, this shaking of the hand and this bobbing nonsense, you know, she would often say, don't call me ma'am, call me Diana. You know, and engage them in a conversation that people would never forget.
Single acts of humanitarianism were what she brought to so many people's lives. She shone a light on their plight. She took the world's media and showed us that we should do more for these people.
How do you work forever? Somebody. That's pretty good. Good business. Wasn't go through it. This is, that's my sister-in-law. What makes you want to do?
I think the royal family really forget the impact that some of their interviews are going to have. And Dimbleby asked Prince Charles, really, when his affair with Camilla started, and he said when his marriage had irrevocably broken down. And that was after Prince Harry was born. She was delighted, actually, when that interview came out. I think she suddenly thought, oh, right, here you go now. It's your turn. It made her look the wronged wife, which, of course, she was.
3 years earlier, she'd had the dress made, and it was perhaps thought to be a bit daring. It was quite fitted, it was off the shoulder.
We can't prove that Diana knew she would eclipse Prince Charles in the headlines the next day, but we do know that she told her stylist that she wanted to look like $1 million, and that obviously resulted in her pictures being splashed across all the papers the next day and Charles being vilified.
It really is a testament to the power of a particular outfit and the impact it can have. So in the 80s, her outfits are very much the focal point of a lot of her sort of public appearances, and she uses it as a tool to effectively communicate and express herself with the public. And in her final years, you can see that her style starts to become more pared back, and one might argue that that could be because she doesn't want the focus to be as much on what she's wearing, although she looks incredibly chic in her outfits, but more what she's doing, her philanthropic ventures, and she wants that to be forefront.
Some of Princess Diana's most beloved looks were actually some of her final looks in the 90s, because she always looked chic but understated, and she actually wore some of her most casual looks in those days, especially when she went to sports days at Prince William and Prince Harry's schools, because she didn't want to draw attention to her and away from the boys, so she just wore outfits that any normal mum would wear. But even when she was off duty, Princess Diana's style never faltered. She always looked chic. Princess Diana had a bit of an athleisure phase in the 90s.
The fact that she would wear slouchy jumpers and cycling shorts and trainers and double denim when she was either doing the school run or if she was going to the gym. These looks have become kind of cemented in cultural history, so much so that years later, decades later, people are still channeling them and paying homage to them. So Hailey Bieber's Vogue shoot took some of her most iconic athleisure wear looks and reimagined them today, because the thing about Diana's style is that it remains timeless and it remains cool and relevant.
And actually that coincided with cycling shorts coming back in fashion across the catwalk from various designer collections. Princess Diana often wore these cycling shorts, chunky trainers, which again are massively in fashion again, and a Virgin Atlantic oversized baggy sweatshirt. Princess Diana actually wore the sweatshirt to taunt photographers a little bit, because they were constantly hounding her, bearing in mind this was after the separation. So she thought if she re-wore the same Virgin Atlantic sweatshirt, they would grow bored of her and not photograph her as much. Princess Diana's style, especially in her later years, is still very much referenced today and very much influences designers and trends, from cycling shorts to high-waisted jeans, oversized blazers, square neck dresses. A lot of people want to be like Princess Diana.
Even as a non-working member of the royal in the latter stages of her life, she'll always be remembered for her work and her program of modernization, this sort of getting in touch with people, and her program against government advice of getting involved in the Lands Mines crusade in Angola and Mozambique. It was very important for people to remember that. And I think that's why people to this day still remember and talk about Diana, because of the way that she began a change at the beginning of how we perceive the royal family to be. And I think in her two sons, certainly William, more so now than Harry because of his situation, sees a direction very much akin to that of his mother.
We all remember the two iconic swimsuits she wore when she was on holiday with Dodi Al-Fayed. So one of them was a leopard print swimsuit while she went jet skiing with him. The other one was a blue swimsuit with a plunging back that she wore to sit at the end of a diving board. And that is a picture that we all remember.
Hasnat Khan had been the princess's companion for over 2 years. Nobody knew about Hasnat Khan. That was not played out on the world stage. Whereas, after they'd broken up, the princess was invited to the south of France by the Mohammed Al-Fayeds. Did you know that the romance of the princess and Dodi Al-Fayed was 30 days from beginning to end. It only lasted 30 days. That was not the love of her life. That was not the man she was going to marry. That's all fabrication. I spoke to her regularly when she was away. Have you seen Hasnat? I said, yes, I went for a drink with him last night. What does he think of me being here in the south of France with Dodi Al-Fayed? Well, he's not too pleased. Has he seen the pictures in the papers? Yes, he has, because you know his routine. You know every morning he goes to the corner shop and sees the press. You know that. And I know that's what you're doing. You're manipulating the world's media by having these pictures taken to show Hasnat who you're with. It's sort of a... Are you jealous? Do you mind? Do you care? Are you bothered? That's what Diana was saying to Hasnat Khan through those pictures in the world's media. And of course, Hasnat was bothered. And I didn't find out until recently that he called her the day before she died on her mobile phone. He called her to try and patch up their relationship. Had she returned to London, I truly believe the romance between Hasnat Khan and the princess would have been rekindled. It was too strong. It was too deep. They were true soulmates.
During her life, Diana wearing some of the biggest trends and influencing the fashion industry is undeniable. I think her legacy today is people are still channeling looks that she wore decades ago. She inspires designer collections from Off-White to Celine to Vogue main cover fashion shoots. She's still incredibly relevant, and I think that needs to be remembered. Whenever Kate Middleton or Meghan Markle step out and they wear a look which resembles something Diana has worn, the internet goes wild for it because they love to see these comparisons to a person who is arguably one of Britain's most famous fashion icons. She remains relevant and she remains part of the nation's identity. While Diana's revenge dress is undeniably a favourite for many Diana fans, my favourite look is one that she wore in the 1988 polo match. She's wearing this oversized masculine blazer over this British Lung Foundation charity jumper. She's wearing Levi's with cowboy boots and a cap. And part of this look and why it's become so famous and so ingrained in the Diana history is because it typifies her approach to fashion. She's quite casual, she's laid back, and she is effortlessly cool. And I think that's what this look really sort of represents, and that is why it's one of my favorites.
It's hard to choose a favorite look of Diana's, but if I had to, I would say one of her final outfits, which was a blue cocktail dress by Jacques Azaguri, which she wore to a performance of Swan Lake at the Royal Albert Hall. And it was very, very simple, very Audrey Hepburn-esque, and it had thick straps, a square neckline, which has come back in fashion again, another perfect example of how she's influenced designers today. And it was bright blue and it was embellished with sequins and it stopped just above the knee and it was impossibly chic. How I remember Princess Diana's style is bold, chic, colourful, pared back, a lot of contradictions and rule-breaking.
I watched Diana blossom from a shy young girl, 18 years old, at Balmoral Castle. I watched the years pass by. She was pushed in the deep end and told to swim. She was told to survive. She was never taught to survive. She learned very quickly. And through the romantic years, and then through the power dressing years, and then the simple dressing years, becoming a global businesswoman, becoming an icon. I watched all of that, becoming the most famous woman in the world.
And the very fact that we're talking about her now, 25 years after her death.
I saw her as beautiful inside as she was on the outside. What an incredible human being.
Her journey throughout the 80s and into the 90s is one that the nation watched as she grew and as she flourished, and you could see that very much so in what she decided to wear. Her legacy now, the fact that the outfits that she wore years and years ago are still being celebrated, recreated, means that we all agree that Diana was incredibly timeless and stylish and iconic.
And we're still talking about her. That's a sign of a great woman. That's a sign of an icon of our times. But I'm also talking to a generation of people who were never around. There's a whole new generation of people who didn't know Diana. And I think I have a moral obligation to say to those young people, I knew her. I stood beside her. I could feel the warmth which she radiated, because she was truly inspirational and unique.